The poem I'd like to share with you comes from a poet by the name of Martín Tonal Melloto. He is of the Nahuatl people of Mexico, the descendants of the Aztec people and the Aztec Empire. And he writes he's a contemporary writer, and he writes both in the language, Nahuatl, and in English, and has published several collections of poetry. He says it was a choice between staying on his parents' small farm and getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning or writing poetry. So you'll hear in a moment the fruits of the decision he made. And this poem is called Attempt at Melody. Night falls, everything in its final throes. There's no birds, no wind, not even any dried up leaves on the sidewalk. The scent I pick up with my man-dog noise tells me to sing, to retrace the day's history. After poring over what I wrote, I come to realize that these melodies are trying to pierce deaf ears, to save eyes lost, and heal men made impatient by society. But time is short, and human walls will not allow my song to be a healing herb, because if they did, it would spread across the earth like a weed and harm a broad, inhuman swath of society. So once again, I go back alone in my attempt to be heard. I want to tell you a story of a woman named Berta Cáceres. Berta Cáceres was born in March of 1971 in a city called La Esperanza in Honduras. La Esperanza means hope, as many of you probably know in Spanish, and La Esperanza is a lovely city which actually is at the highest elevation in Honduras, and therefore it has the coolest temperatures, which many folks flock to in time of great heat. La Esperanza is also in the middle of what is called La Ruta Lenca, the route of the Lenca, the roadway of the Lenca people, one of the oldest and largest indigenous nations in Honduras. According to another organization, Cultural Survival, the Lenca people have been, which also dedicates itself to indigenous history, self-determination, and justice. The Lenca people have been in Honduras for many, many, many centuries. They did battle with colonizers, as did indigenous peoples up and down the Americas and around the world, and unlike many other nations, the Lenca people were able to hold on to a good part of their land. As Berta Cáceres grew older, she became aware of efforts, serious, well-funded efforts, to cause damage to her ancestral lands. As it turns out, the mountains of Honduras are a fertile source for highly valued minerals: iron ore, gold, antimony, many others. Antimony is used increasingly in products for national defenses of various militaries of various nations. It can be used to strengthen batteries. It's become increasingly valuable in our modern world, and I don't need to tell you the value of iron ore or of gold. Most of the richest veins of these minerals are located either on indigenous lands or very near to them. In 2007 in Honduras, there was a law passed to call a moratorium to these mining activities because, again, they were causing tremendous damage. But in 2013, the government lifted the moratorium, and in fact also did other things such as to legalize the use of cyanide and other, so it actually not only re-encouraged the transnational mining companies, but also made them more damaging to the environment. The mining of these minerals requires a tremendous amount of fresh water. So again, in 2013, as soon as the moratorium was lifted, transnational companies led by China, the United States, Canada, and many other countries decided to build a dam to divert large amounts of water from various Lenca rivers in order to provide the water for the mining. Berta and other indigenous leaders gathered together to organize a protest against this misuse of their rivers. And so one morning they began to use their bodies, as many other protest groups have used around the world, to lay down in the road leading from the headquarters of the Chinese transnational running this project to the actual site of building the dam. And they continued to do this. Now, alongside all of these events that I'm sharing with you, the transnational companies realized, I don't know how, but I can imagine, that there was a significant fund that benefited the national and military and local police of Honduras. And so they gave all of the companies very large sums of money to this fund, which of course incentivized the military police to crack down on protests. Not long after the protests began, a Honduran soldier opened fire and killed 2 of the people protesting. I want to share with you a very moving quote, if I can find it in here. I know I will. A moving quote from one of the activists working with Berta and her companions. He's an indigenous elder of the Lenca people, and he said this: "In the midst of all this struggle, there are powerful and beautiful things. In our land and rivers and forests, there are spirits who are helping us. We have faith in God and in the Holy Mother, and we are aided by the spirits of the ancestors, as you saw in today's story. We have faith in everything we do in this place, and we are really grateful for the international solidarity we have been shown. We don't feel alone, we feel supported." So after the murders of these 2 protesters, in a shocking reversal of what judgment and justice should be, the Honduran government arrested Berta Cáceres and several of her leaders, co-leaders of this movement, and charged them with inciting violence. Eventually, they were freed, but they suffered imprisonment. And eventually, too, the movement to stop the dam succeeded. It took several years, but it succeeded. As a result of the success of this work, Berta was awarded what I believe to be one of the most prestigious environmental awards, the Goldman Award, for her efforts in halting the work on Agua Zarca Dam. 1 year later, a group of armed men entered her home and assassinated her. A former soldier with the U.S. trained special forces. In fact, it turned out that all of the paramilitary folks who entered her home, like so many other paramilitary troops in all of Latin America, had been trained at Fort Benning, Georgia. But a year after the assassination, one of the U.S. trained special forces said that her name had been on their hit list for a very long time. Amnesty International, one of maybe the best known and most respected human rights organization in the world, has reported that in 2022 alone, 177 indigenous land defenders were murdered. Their murders are rarely, if ever, investigated, and there is no judgment, no justice for the victims. And I say this not only because it is important to me, and I hope to all of us here together, to understand the intricacies of how this system in which we live really works, and the trade-offs and the sacrifices that are made by those who are seeking not just the simple human right of living on their land and having access to the same things that all of us have access to. 177 Earth defenders, 88% of them in the Americas. It's dangerous business to do this work. And as the Lenca elder prayed, and as he shared in that quote I shared with you a little bit earlier, the movements of resistance are full of beauty. They are full of the healing herb that the poet Martin wants to share with the world. The herb that would run around the world and enlighten the many of us who are either unaware or complicit in the destruction and cruelty that is often involved in the things we take for granted. In spite of these conditions, indigenous activists around the world continue this amazing work and this teaching work, like these music videos, teaching prayers, teaching heritage, recovering ancient languages, recovering pieces of culture that really were never erased. Now, I don't know about you, but when I went to school as a child in the United States, I was taught it was a very simple story. The colonizers arrived, they had superior weaponry and a whole arsenal of the nastiest diseases known to humanity. And poof, pretty soon after that, all the indigenous people had been decimated. I'm not being snarky, that's kind of the story. And so somehow these populations now numbering, at a conservative estimate, 500 million people in the world, somehow disappeared. I want to leave you today with a different idea, with a different concept, and with a different vision. Because yes, there's the destruction, yes, there's the oppression, yes, there are the extrajudicial murders and the rampant removal of human and civil rights. But along the way, the cultures of the colonizer and the cultures of the colonized have learned from each other. And you and I can continue to learn from one another. So let me paint, as I close, a mental picture for you. In Peru, in the great cities of Cusco and other cities in the mountains, deep in the empire of what had been the Inca and the peoples before the Inca, there are buildings. The foundations of the buildings are built with stones meticulously cut to fit perfectly with one another, so that they needed no mortar to make these buildings. They needed no mortar to build Machu Picchu, which I know some of us, including myself, have had the deep privilege to see. So at the foundation of these buildings are the extraordinary Inca foundations, When the Spaniards came, and it took them a long time, it wasn't automatic, it took them a long time, but eventually they did militarily win. They built their buildings on top of that stone. They couldn't duplicate it, so they built wooden buildings atop the stone, and the two have endured together for 5 centuries or more. In their cathedrals, there is not an image of a Christ or a crucified Christ, as there is in many European cathedrals. There is an image of the Virgin Mary, but she is dressed and painted like the Pachamama, the great Inca goddess of fertility and beauty and the earth, with a skirt that comes out like a big triangle that is blue, covered with stars. John Adams, the second president of the United States, when he got to the end of his life and was writing more journals and telling of his experience, writes nostalgically about his childhood when the Indians, the indigenous Americans, and he lived in the same neighborhoods and learned from each other and played together, and how he regretted what had changed and how the richness of cultures living together had been destroyed. We are Unitarian Universalists. We believe in the interdependence of all creatures and of all things, which is the healing herb for our world. And so before I close, I invite you to close your eyes and hold in your heart Berta Cáceres and the hundreds and thousands of indigenous activists who continue to teach us how we can all work together for a more beautiful world. Amen. Ashe, and blessed be.